Welcome back. A new report from Environmental Defence finds the amount of plastic packaging used in grocery stores is increasing. The study's key findings are that more than 70% of products in Canada's produce and baby food aisles are now packaged in plastic, which can expose people to microplastics and harmful chemical additives. Grocery packaging is a significant source of plastic pollution and waste, including a growing amount of plastics that cannot be recycled. The report also found big grocery chains do not have effective plans in place to reduce plastic packaging. For reaction to this report, we are joined by Steven Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Minister, good to have you. Thanks for making the time tonight.
My pleasure, Lindsay.
So what's your reaction to this new study, especially as the federal government is moving to potentially put a ban on plastics?
Well, in fact, we've already, barely 6 months after I arrived as Environment Minister, I have put in place a ban on a certain number of harmful single-use plastics that are very difficult, if not impossible, to recycle. But we can't ban our way out of plastic pollution. So our approach is to do a number of things, but we're just getting started. For example, we're working to put in place new regulations to ensure that there's no more greenwashing when it comes to the use of the recycling logo. So companies that want to use the recycling logo in Canada when it comes to plastic will have to meet certain criteria that the federal government will be working on. For example, to be able to use this logo, your plastic would have to be recyclable by X amount of Canadians all over the country. So if it's recyclable only in one province or one region, but not elsewhere, you won't be able to use it. What we're also doing is we're working to put in place regulations to ensure that there's more recycled plastic that is being used in the fabrication of plastics, so that we end up with less plastics in our environment, less plastic that is being wasted, and more plastic that is being recycled. And our goal is to reduce plastic pollution to zero by 2040. So we have a long way to go, and I'm the first one to recognize that we have a lot of things to do. And I welcome this report by Environmental Defence to help guide our action on this important issue.
Of course. I mean, there have been some companies, though, and even some provincial governments who have been taking the government to court over parts of this plastic ban. What's the situation there?
You're right. Sometimes, Lindsay, I feel that when I come back home and I talk to the kids about how my day went, and if I haven't been sued for something the federal government is doing to try and protect the environment, it's probably not. I probably haven't been working hard enough, because we are sued on fighting plastic pollution. We were sued on putting a price on pollution by provinces like Ontario. Even my own province of Quebec went to court for that. We are being sued on the reform we brought to impact assessment. So many of the things we do are displeasing to part of the industry and to certain provinces, but that doesn't mean that they're not important, and that doesn't mean that we don't have to do them despite some resistance. I suspect that this will likely make it all the way to the Supreme Court, like the case on pricing pollution made it to the Supreme Court. On impact assessment, in fact, we're waiting for a ruling from the Supreme Court on impact assessment, probably in the coming months. But on the ban on certain plastics, I suspect it will also make it to the Supreme Court.
Okay, Minister, I want to switch gears here, because while we have you, I think it'd be good to talk about some of the big topics in the GTA right now. One of those that we keep seeing, even in the mayoral race that's happening in Toronto, keep hearing about, is the proposed development of the Greenbelt. Now, as the federal environment minister, you have said that you can and will intervene on that proposal if necessary. What's the latest on that? The Greenbelt, Rouge Park, what's the latest?
So for the Rouge Park, the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada is launching public hearings. In fact, organizations that want to take part can already apply, and the hearings will start in the coming months. We are planning to launch other hearings for other parts of Ontario where the federal government has invested money for conservation. I can't disclose them yet, because we're still working from a judicial perspective to make sure that we can intervene. But I think the Premier called the Greenbelt a scam, and frankly, I find it a bit. I find this a bit unbelievable that the Premier of Ontario would say that. to fight climate change, as we're seeing more floodings or forest fires out west, we know that one of our best ally is nature. And the Ontario's own urban planners have said that to meet the growing demands for housing, you don't need to build in a green belt. That's not the federal government that said that. That's not me, the environment minister. That's an Ontario government organization that said that we can build what we need to build in Ontario to house people affordably without doing this and destroying the environment in the Greenbelt. So I profoundly disagree with the characterization of Premier Ford when it comes to the Greenbelt. We need those green spaces to have clean air, clean water. If you want to build a filtration plant to filter your water instead of protecting marshlands to do that, it's going to cost taxpayers at least 6 times more. So unless Premier Ford is telling Ontarians that he wants to raise their taxes because he doesn't want to protect the environment so that they can have clean water, and that we're going to start building filtration plants all over the place, it's going to cost Ontarians a lot of money. There's a much cheaper way and a more efficient way of doing that, and that's just protecting the environment we already have.
Right, and that was part of the provincial government's argument, really, is to develop on the Greenbelt because Ontario needs more housing. So I know you can't disclose maybe specifics, but does this mean are you prepared to intervene, or will you be working with the provincial government in terms of the Greenbelt? I mean, what's happening next? What can you say?
I would love nothing more than to be able to work with the Ontario government to protect the Greenbelt. And if that was their wishes, I'll be the first one to say, hey, let's do it together. I have stopped private development in the past on areas that would have threatened the habitat of species at risks in Canada. I've done so. I was barely a week on the job the first time I did it. And if I need to do it again to protect lands that are habitat for species at risks in Canada, I will do it again. So what we're doing on the Rouge is we're looking at what could be the potential impacts of the proposed development on this jewel, which is one of the most popular national park in all of Canada, one of the few national park that can be accessed by public transit. I did it. It's a 25 minute GO train ride from downtown Toronto. How many places in the country can we have access to something like that by public transit? There's only a handful of them. So we're looking at what could be the impact and what we need to do as a federal government to protect this very important national park and jewel for many people of Ontario and certainly in the GTA area.
Okay, Federal Environment Minister Steven Guilbeault, thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Anytime.